And welcome back. Time now to get a national perspective of how the Razorbacks are doing, how they're faring thus far. 24/7 Sports, The Late Kick with Josh Pate delivers college football game breakdowns, rapid reactions, and so much more. And I actually had a chance to catch up with Josh earlier this week to get his take on the Cardinal and White. I'm joined now with Josh Pate from The Late Kick, with Josh Pate on 24/7 Sports, national college football analyst on CBS HQ. You've got all the titles. You cover a lot of teams, but we're here to talk about Arkansas. And this fan base loves to talk about the Razorbacks. You've given them a lot of praise this season. I want to know how they're faring compared to where you thought this team would be in the preseason. You said ahead of the season they were criminally underrated, basically just looking at the schedule. Where do they fall now?
Yeah, they've probably, I would say they've slightly exceeded my expectation. The reason in the preseason, though, I thought they were criminally underrated was because I believe, and this is just me apparently, because the preview magazine culture did not do this, I believe you should take the team and put them in one compartment. Then you should take their schedule, which has nothing to do with the quality of the team, and put it in another compartment. Well, as you have clearly seen, people have trouble delineating the two. And so they look at Arkansas and they say, even if I think they're good, they got to play that schedule, which means they're going to lose some games to me, which means they're not going to be highly ranked, which means I don't think they're a good team. Well, that's not the way it should work. Because the fact of the matter is, if I took that team out of Fayetteville and I plucked them down in coastal Carolina's footprint and I gave them their schedule, this same Arkansas team would be undefeated right now. And they'd be ranked in the top 15 and everyone will be talking about them. So the point is, I didn't change anything. Sam Pittman's still the coach. KJ Jefferson's still quarterback. Everyone's still the same. It's just the schedule's different. Having said that, I don't think that if I were to have looked at Arkansas preseason and I saw that game against Texas and Fayetteville and I saw Texas A&M and Arlington, if I were to put percentages on it, I wouldn't have been looking at them to go 2-0 there. A split would have been really nice. Either one of those wins would have been very noteworthy. But then all of a sudden, when they beat Texas in the manner in which they beat Texas, and all of a sudden, since it was at home, you get that huge snowball of momentum, well, then you feel like anything's possible. And then when you go into Arlington and you beat A&M, really anything's possible. Well, I'd say they've overachieved a little bit relative to my expectation, with the understanding also that the totality of impact of that schedule also clearly took its toll, especially in the last game they played before Pine Bluff.
When you went to Texas A&M, was that your first impression of the Arkansas fan base? What was your overall impression of Razorback fans?
I think so. It was my first impression in the Sam Pittman era. I had seen Arkansas games before, but it was a little ways back. And it's so refreshing to be around a fan base that does not take winning for granted. And the concept of being back on the national scene is still somewhat new. Because I'm largely at the biggest games every week, which means I'm at a ton of Bama games, I'm at a ton of Clemson games, and it's inevitable, I'm saying, but it's when you're around those fan bases, they're used to winning. And so there's just an appreciation that Arkansas folks have, and certainly had that afternoon. I wish I could be around that every week, because that is, to me, that's what college football is about.
You mentioned KJ Jefferson earlier. Before the season, this was a guy chosen to, or predicted to be the worst quarterback in the conference. How has he exceeded expectations and then some?
Well, I think first it's safe to say he has exceeded them. And then you ask, how has he exceeded them? You cannot overstate how important it is just to have a defined identity, just to have a defined plan. And so that's point one. Point two, though, is no one, Kendall Briles, for instance, no one there has tried to square peg anything into a round hole. There may be, I guarantee you, there are sections of Kendall Briles' total offensive playbook that are gathering dust right now, because he doesn't have the exact personnel that he would like to be able to do this, this, or this. But the sign of a good play caller, the sign of a good coordinator and a good coach is you leave all that over here on the table. Maybe the Arkansas 2023 team will be great for this. Maybe the 2022 team will be great. But here's what I have right now. And so what they have right now, they've torn out what wouldn't work. They've stuck with what would work. And even though they haven't won every game, I think offensively what they've done is they've put themselves in best position to win every game.
So what does the future look like in 3-5 years for Arkansas if you had to predict?
Yeah, so Sam Pittman's the constant. Sometimes when you've got a coach that's rising, the first thing you do is you clap. The second thing you do is you get concerned because you're looking over your left and right shoulder because you know bigger jobs may come open. That's the beauty of a culture fit. That's the beauty of a guy who is perfectly tailored for that job. I like where they're headed. Like, I like the trajectory. The thing about it is, it's not always a hockey stick. Like, it doesn't always just shoot straight up. But if it's year over year, incremental progression, you don't touch it. You don't mess with it, because that's called progress, and you don't get in the way of that, especially in this sport where it's such a fickle commodity.
That's called progress. How about that insight? Much appreciation to Josh Pate from 24/7 Sports. Thank you so much, Josh.